All right, we are returning to John. We need to finish up this wonderful gospel. We took a break here for a couple weeks to study Calvinism and its effect on the Southern Baptist denomination. So let's return to John chapter 18. This is the Passion Week. Jesus had already celebrated the Seder supper, the Jewish Seder meal with his disciples, and then basically told them that he was exacting a new covenant that would be better than the old covenant. And then he basically told them that he was going to die. The party was over that they had known basically for 3 years, and that he was going to the cross. And so they were saddened, and he goes to the garden to pray, and there his three most faithful disciples can't stay awake. They keep falling asleep. Comes back to them. Guys, what's up? Not one of them was sleeping. All three of them was sleeping. And so God was striking a covenant with God. And he didn't want man to mess it up. So all that has transpired. Now we move to chapter 18. And here come the temple guards, along with a few Roman soldiers. But here's the temple guards, and they come. And it's at nighttime. It says in verse 3, Judas took a company of soldiers and some temple police from the chief priest and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. So we see it's happening at nighttime. Okay? So we see right now that, you know, we just kind of entered into an election that many of us felt like was very dubious, if not sinister. And here, we're getting ready to find out Jesus is going to be tried at night, which is against the law. So, you know, some things never change, right?
Right.
Some things never change.
Right.
And so tonight, as we read chapter 18, I want us to be cognizant of some emotions that are being played out. I think the depth of the Gospels really hit us when we slow down and we really put ourselves in their shoes at that moment when all this is transpiring. It really drives home to me the depth and the length of what God did during that time. And so tonight I want you to think about, as we read this, about emotions and about the panorama of emotions that we're going to experience here as we read this. What would you say are the two extremes of emotions?
Love and hate.
Yeah. Love and hate. Those are the two extremes. And we're going to see that tonight. We're going to see that. And then what would you say is the greatest emotion people face?
Fear.
Fear. Fear is the most common emotion that we face. People fear the unknown, right? We're going to see that, no doubt, coming up here in just a moment. While I'm getting ready to read this, though, I need somebody, Brother Mike Petty, would you look up, I think it's in Luke, where Jesus is talking about Simon, about I prayed for you.
Okay.
When Satan was wanting to sift him. I meant to do that earlier and I forgot to do it. I'm sorry. So, here we are. And they arrive, and we read this a couple of weeks ago, and Jesus basically tells the Jews, he speaks to them with the same words that was spoken to Moses out of the burning bush. They come to arrest him, and they said, we're seeking Jesus, and he said, I am. And to the Jews, that's a matter when you just say I am. Your Bibles may have he in there as in parentheses, that's added. That's not what Jesus said. Jesus said I am. And that word speaks of existentialism. Not I was, not I will be, but I am. And when he said that, he knocks them all backwards. You think they're at a charismatic meeting and they've all been slain in the Spirit. He knocks them backwards with the force of his existence. So anyway, they get up, and you'd think that would be enough to dissuade them from arresting Jesus, wouldn't you? But when hate is so great, it can even overcome fear. Just think of that. Soldiers, temple guards. And Jesus spoke and said, I am. And it knocked them off their feet. And instead of saying, wow, we are messing with something here we need not be messing with, got up, dusted themselves off up, and went to arresting again. That's how strong hate is. That it can overcome your fear. Now we know love overcomes fear. But boy, there's an example where hate overcomes fear. Right? Alright, so let's go ahead and look now. So let's pick it up in verse 12 of chapter 18. It said, Then the company of soldiers, the commander, and the Jewish temple police arrested Jesus and tied him up. First they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was advantageous that one man should die for the people. You know, for the Jews, they understood the concept of the scapegoat. That you would take a goat and you would let that goat go to let the nation go free. And that was kind of what they were thinking about, okay? So he had that concept in mind. Yes, Mike?
I thought Jesus put that large deer back on.
He may have.
It's not in here in this.
It's probably in one of the other Gospels.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the beauty of the Gospels. They all have different perspectives, but the overarching story is the same.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Speaking of that, if every single Gospel writer said the same exact thing, it would be contrived, right? Let's get our story straight.
Right.
But the fact that there are nuances within each of the Gospel accounts tells you it's legitimate. That's one of the, if anything, one of the evidences that it is credible. That's a good question. So it says here, verse 15, Meanwhile, Simon Peter was following Jesus, as was another disciple. Many scholars believe John speaks about himself as in the third person there. He said that disciple was an acquaintance of the high priest. So he went with Jesus into the high priest courtyard. There goes Mike sneezing again. It's Wednesday night. God bless you, my brother. Cut it out. We extend grace only so far. Then comes the law. Verse 16, But Peter remained standing outside by the door. So the other disciple, more than likely John, the one known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the girl who was the doorkeeper and allowed them to bring Peter in. Then the slave girl who was the doorkeeper said to Peter, You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you? I am not, he said. Now the slaves and the temple police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. They were standing there warming themselves, and Peter was standing with them warming himself. And then verse 19, the high priest, now we're going to move to a different scene. Verse 19, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus answered him. I have always taught in the synagogue and in the temple complex, where all the Jews congregate, and I haven't spoken anything in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who heard what I told them. Look, they know what I said. Can you not relate to that? You see what he's saying here? Jesus is basically saying, I'm not trying to drum up a secret conspiracy. Everything that I've done, you know, what you see is what you get. In the midst of what we're going through now, how many of you trust anything that you see anymore on TV and the news? There's all these secret groups and conspiracies and things going on that you just, you know, because that's the way we are as human beings. We can't trust a lot of times even someone's right in front of our face. So we have to contrive these conspiracies. So Jesus is basically telling the high priest here, now this is Annas, this is the son of Caiaphas, and he was basically the acting high priest, but Caiaphas was older. Caiaphas was kind of in semi-retirement, if you will. And so we're going to get to see him in a minute too. But Annas, he comes to Annas, who's the acting high priest, has a right to question any Jew, especially when it comes to teaching doctrine. And he basically is accusing him of teaching things that are in opposition to the Mosaic Law, which could be heretical. And that's why Jesus responds, I didn't teach anything in secret. There's no secret documents out there rolling around. Everything I said was for anyone to hear. Okay? In verse 22, when he said these things, one of the temple police standing by slapped Jesus, saying, is this the way you answer the high priest? Jesus said, can you imagine the restraint it took Jesus? Had this guy come up and smack him in the face. Breathe on him and he's gone. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. So verse 23, Jesus answered, if I have spoken wrongly, Jesus answered him, give evidence about the wrong. But if rightly, why do you hit me? And then verse 24, then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. So he's going to send him to Daddy. Okay? Now let's get back to Peter. So that's the first instance of Jesus being tried was before the Jewish council or the high priest. Okay? Rome's not involved with this at this time. This is all the Jewish high council and the high priest. This is the, can I use an analogy? This is a Republican Party turning on their own candidate. Forgive me, Lord.
So Annas is Mitch.
Yeah, Annas is Mitch. Yeah, I guess so. Man, who ever thought the Bible would be this entertaining? All right, verse 25. So now we're getting back to Peter. Now Simon Peter was standing and still warming himself, and they said to him, you aren't one of his disciples too, are you? He denied it, said, I am not. One of the high priest's slave, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, said, didn't I see you with him in the garden? Peter then denied it again. Immediately a rooster crowed. Fear. Been with him for 3 years. One of his first disciples he called. But fear was so palpable, Peter couldn't stand with him. You know, unless you're willing to live for the Lord, you're not ready to die for Him. And I'm going to be preaching a series of messages here in the next few weeks, over the next month, of what it means to really follow Christ. Not just be His friend, not just be his acquaintance, but what does it mean to follow Christ? Because friends, I want to tell you, I think our nation will never be friendly to the Christians again. I think we're heading in a dark place. So we might as well get ready to hitch up our britches and learn what it means to be maybe even a martyr. You know what the word martyr is in the Greek, what it translates out in the English language? The word martyr is the word witness. What better witness than to lay down your life for what you really believe in? But that's what the word martyr in the Greek means, and translated means witness.
So the question,
Yes.
more likely had Peter said, yes, I was with him, then they would have taken him away too.
Yeah. He would have been arrested. You know, that's why I think over here when Jesus was protecting them, I think it was over here in the garden. I don't know if it's in John's gospel or not, but Jesus basically said, you came for me, just arrest me. So they were fearful that they were all going to be arrested. So that was already something that was in their mind, you know, that perhaps they talked amongst themselves even, you know. I'm sure they did. You know, you get a group together and they're sitting around the fire or whatever, and they're just saying, wonder where this is going, especially after he's told them, fellas, I'm not going to be the king. I'm not marching in here to be the king. I'm getting ready to be crucified. Can you imagine a dialogue between the disciples at this time? Yeah, Steve?
Not only was he fearful, Peter fearful of the people, that he had to deny Christ, but the guilt, and, you know, he probably thought, well, I'm doomed for eternity now, because I've done denied Christ.
Well, the fear is the first thing that strikes you. The guilt will come later.
Right.
Absolutely.
The really cool thing is later on, is when Jesus says, bring Peter with you.
Yeah,
After,
right.
after he's risen.
After the resurrection. But even before that, Mike, do you have the passage in Luke?
I do.
It is in Luke, isn't it?
It's Luke 22, 31 through 34. You want me to read it?
Just read it if you don't
Okay.
mind. Now, let me set this up. This is the night before Jesus has already told them, basically, I'm going to the cross. And Peter said, no, Lord, that can't be your plan. And Jesus has to tell him, Satan, get behind me. Okay? It's in this context. And then also he says this. Go ahead, Mike.
It says, the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. But he said to him, Lord, I'm ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. Then he said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know me.
Thank you. The thing that I love about this was Jesus told Peter, Peter, Satan's getting ready to test you. Here's his test. He told him in advance, and here's the test. But I love here, but he says, but when you have turned, but when you have turned, not if you turn, but when you've turned, that's when your ministry will really start. I get goosebumps every time I think about that. Satan's going to test you, but I've already prayed for you. You know, isn't that wonderful?
Yes, it is.
Once again, he's not thinking about himself. He's going to the cross, and he knows how horrific it's going to be. He's not thinking about himself. He's thinking about Peter. Okay. Now, let me say something before we go any further. These are fearful times. And I always, you know, you always want to stay positive, but once again, I just believe looking at history and looking at prophecy, I believe the Christians in America are getting ready to go through our darkest times. But know this, Jesus has already prayed for us.
Right.
He's already prayed for us. And these are times that we can be minister like never before. If we'll just stay faithful and not walk in fear, but walk in faith. That's what he's asking us to do. It's going to be tough because this flesh is fearful. This flesh we live in is fearful. But he says, don't walk in the flesh, walk in the Spirit. So now more than ever before, I want to tell you, friends, you need to do everything you can do to get your family in church. Get them in here. We need to get strong, and we need to bring in as many as we can, because I believe the barbarians are at the gate. I really do.
Right.
So, all right. Okay. Any questions or anything before we go on? Okay, let's go down to verse 25. So now Peter was standing and warming himself. Oh, no, let's see. I already did that. I already read 25. Where's Sharon?
48.
Sharon's not here tonight.
No.
Sharon keeps me on task.
You're at 28.
I'm chasing rabbits again. There I go. 28. All right, verse 28. So then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. And it was early morning. So see, they've been trying him all through the night. They did not enter the headquarters themselves, otherwise they would be defiled and unable to eat the Passover. So you see, they're still Jews, and they're bringing him now. They're bringing him to Pilate, but they can't go into Pilate's house, or it would defile them, and they couldn't eat the Seder meal.
What's Seder?
Seder meal is the different elements and components of a meal they'd have for Passover that would remind them of the Exodus, the time that they were in Egypt. When the death angel came through on the night when God killed the firstborn, but he protected them. So it's all about eating a lamb that would protect them. The lamb and his blood was slain, and it's about they eat they eat unleavened bread. They ate bitter herbs to remind them of their suffering and slavery, but it's different components of a meal. We sell a lot of produce during Passover Seder meal, I'll tell you that. Horseradish. Sell a lot of horseradish, brother. I do, yeah.
Did they have horseradish back then?
Yeah, they did.
Did they?
Yeah, they had horseradish back then. What do you think they used to roll up and smoke and all that back then? Horseradish. That was their Vicks Vapor Rub. All right, I don't need to be so silly. Where are we? All right, verse 29. Then Pilate came out to them and said, "What charge do you bring against this man?" And they answered him, "If this man weren't a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you." So Pilate told them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." "It's not legal for us to put anyone to death," the Jews declared. They said this so that Jesus' words might be fulfilled, signifying what sort of death he was going to die. So signifying what kind of death he was going to die, the Romans crucified. That was a common practice. They would line the streets of any city, not just Jerusalem, but any street that they occupied, and if there was any dissidents at all, they crucified them. That was their method of execution, was the cross. And then verse 33, then Pilate went back into the headquarters, summoned Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus answered, "Are you asking this on your own, or have others told you about me?" "I'm not a Jew, am I?" Pilate replied. "Your own nation and the chief priest handed you over to me. What have you done?" "My kingdom is not of this world," said Jesus. "If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Jews. As it is, my kingdom does not have its origin here." "You are a king then?" Pilate asked. You say that I am a king, Jesus replied. I was born for this, and I have come into the world for this, to testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. What is truth? Asked Pilate. Boy, that's a question we need to ask today, isn't it?
Yeah, it didn't so.
What is
What is
truth?
truth?
What a statement. You see, I think Pilate was very sincere. I think he really was wanting to know why they would bring this man, the Jews, at an odd hour. You know, why are you bringing him to me?
Like a red flag went up to him.
Yeah, like a red flag had to be going up. And then according to other Gospels, his wife had told him she had a dream the previous night. Don't mess with this man. You know, don't, be careful how you handle this man. So red flags had gone up for him. Absolutely. But we're going to see that Pilate is controlled by fear as well. Even though Pilate here is very discerning. You know, for Caesar to send Pilate, think of this, Rome basically controlled the entire civilized world. And for Caesar to send Pilate to the most troublesome hot spot on the globe, Palestine, it was to keep peace. And so Pilate was very astute when it came to discernment. He was probably very brilliant when it came to being able to judge and discern rightly. And I think he's doing that here. The best he can. He's trying to determine what is it that these people hate you so much. What's going on, right? Steve, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, in verse 31, where it says only Romans are permitted to execute someone, I thought that the Jews used to stone people all the time.
Well, they did stone them, and they may have even stoned during the time, but it wasn't legal to do that. So they may have stoned people in the first century, and but it wasn't by law. They couldn't legally do it. So what would happen is they could get a group outside and stone them to death, but they couldn't. The Pharisees and the Sanhedrin could not say, exterminate this guy. It couldn't be a law from them. Okay? It was a law of Moses, and so they wanted to obey the law of Moses, but Rome said, we hold the sword. You cannot execute when you're under our rule. Okay? And that's why Paul talks about, even in Romans, Apostle Paul, he writes back in Romans and says government has the power to wield the sword. What he's talking about there in the Greek, the word is a scimitar, or an executioner's sword. It's to execute people. So Rome had the right to do that, and the Jews, Rome did not want them executing people. They didn't want them doing that. That was really against Roman rule.
Right.
But they would still do it. You know, they'd take them out back and stone them to death, and then, where's Joe Johnson? I don't know. Haven't seen him in weeks.
They were gonna stone Jesus right there in the temple though, like in the beginning of John.
Yep, they were. They were going to do it. And once again, their hatred was so great. Their hatred was so great, they would face the consequences even of Pilate and try to dismiss it, you know. You know, the thing you got to understand about the Pharisees, both the Pharisees and the Sadducees were part of the Sanhedrin, and they were both a group of lawyers. They were lawyers. The whole group. Their job was to interpret the Mosaic Law. They're a bunch of lawyers. So they're going to get out of whatever they're going to do, right? There's a loophole in here somewhere, by golly. Yeah, Mike.
Just another thought is at this time that this is happening, of course, we're leading up to Passover. I always thought and felt that, you know, Pilate was not an idiot. I mean, he was, like you said, I mean, he was an intelligent man. He wouldn't have been there by fluke for Caesar to send him there. At this particular point in time, Jerusalem is overflowing with pilgrims, with people from all over traveling for Passover. More than likely, it's from something else that I had read, the Roman garrison there was probably stretched to maintain some kind of control.
They need to call it the National Guard.
There you go. Well, at any rate, I always believe about this time period, Pilate knows he's getting played. He knows the kangaroo court when he sees one, and he's getting played. But if he doesn't play along, he risks the fear of an insurrection. I hate to use that word. An insurrection in Jerusalem, that Passover, which will most certainly get the attention of Caesar,
Right.
which is the last thing
That he wanted, because he's there to keep the peace.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's politics being played here. There politics with the Jews, politics with the temple,
Right.
politics with Caesar.
Yeah,
Is just a mess.
yeah. It's a political mess.
Yeah, it really is.
So, I mean, nothing new under the sun.
No, there really isn't.
The characters just change, but it
Yeah.
all remains the same.
Yeah.
Political mess.
Yeah, so,
Gotta be so tired of it.
all right, so let's see, where were we now? But yeah, that's good, that's good insight. All right, let's see, where were we now?
Doesn't that make it a relief to know that? That
Yeah,
the same thing's happening, well, we already know the ending too.
right, right. And we know this ended up in a dispensation called the New Covenant. It had to happen. But even in the midst of God's working behind the scenes and through people, God works through people to get his will exacted. And, however it plays out, we do know the Antichrist is coming to bring a one world government. And that's one of the things that as a Christian that's why I was one of the biggest fans of Trump, because he was for national sovereignty and against a one world government. And right now it's, the liberals are pressing for a one world government. Because that's where the Antichrist, that's his platform, will be off the one world government. Yeah, so, yeah. Politics, always been around, always will be until Jesus comes back again. And even then, listen, he's sitting on the throne for 1,000 years, and then Satan is put in a bottomless pit for 1,000 years, and then when he's released, he finds enough people on this planet stupid enough to follow him in Armageddon. So there'll still be politics, even when the King of Kings is sitting on the throne in Jerusalem. Isn't that amazing?
Can't have good without evil, it's balance, right?
Right.
It's,
So anyway, let's go to finish out verse 38 when Pilate says what is truth. And it says, after he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and he told them, I find no grounds for charging him. You have a custom that I release. See, now this is where Pilate thought he had him. It's the chess game, right?
Right. Good.
You have a custom that I release one prisoner to you at the Passover. So do you want me to release to you the King of the Jews? Sure you do, right? Que sera, sera. No. No, we don't want him. They shouted back, not this man, but Barabbas. And then John goes on to say, now Barabbas was a revolutionary. So, in Pilate's mind, Mike, you're so right, it was such a powder keg in Palestine at that moment. Barabbas was known, he was in prison for trying to overthrow Caesar's rule in Palestine. He's the last person you'd want to release. I'm surprised he's still alive at this point. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't take him out and quarter him or something right away. Got it. But Barabbas of all people, this is the Charles Manson of their day. And they chose him instead of Jesus. That's how powerful hate was. All right, that's chapter 18. Questions, comments? So tonight we've seen the emotions run a gamut, and whenever you're involved in politics, you're going to have emotions. You're going to have love and hate. We saw it, we were seeing it now, and we're seeing it now in the divided states of America. Love and hate, and the most common thing is fear. It's fear on both sides. Fear from the liberals that we're going to live in the dark ages as conservatives, and fear from the conservatives that we're going to a one-world government. That's fear. So our only hope we have is who? Jesus Christ, isn't it?
Right.
Trusting God. Do I have time left to go on, or what time is it?
20 after.
Okay. Anybody want to discuss this, or you want me to dive in chapter 19?
Let's continue on a few more verses.
You want to go a few more verses?
I do.
Okay. Fanatic, you. I love it. I love it. All right. Chapter 19 and verse 1. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers also twisted together a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and threw a purple robe around him. Well, so once again, here's the soldiers, group of soldiers getting together. Guess what they're going to do?
Take
They're
his
gonna
robe.
they're gonna haze him.
Oh,
Already on birth.
Just
Yeah.
like a bunch of soldiers.
Just like a bunch of soldiers.
If there's sailors there, they wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, that's right. But this is a bunch of army people.
That's right.
These are foot soldiers. They're not sailors. God save the Navy. And they took a purple robe around him. So what are they doing? A crown and a purple robe. Why purple?
Most expensive colors.
Purple was very exotic in that day. It was hard to get purple. They claim that, scholars claim that the only way they could get purple was through a little, kind of like a mollusk or something in the bottom of the ocean, that they would squeeze that out and its secretions would bring a purple dye. So it was very difficult to get purple. Autumn is back there going,
Sounds gross.
shrimp blood. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Crawfish guts. They had purple dye back in those days. So anyway, so they bring purple. So purple, that's why purple is the color of kings and royalty. Because only they could afford it. So they're mocking him, give him a crown, and put a robe of royalty on him. Okay, because he is the king of the Jews, right? All right. And they repeatedly came up to him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews," and were slapping his face. And Pilate went outside again and said to them, "Look, I'm bringing him outside to you to let you know I find no grounds for charging him." So that's it. Pilate just said, "I'm going to punish him and let him go." But that wasn't enough for him, right? Verse 5, then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Boy, you know that probably incited the crowd even more. See, the Jews didn't see that because the Jews couldn't go in there. So Pilate took him back where the praetorium was, where the soldiers were, their garrison, and where they were bunked and where they lived. And he took him back there to the courtyard, and they punished him there. So he brings him out now from the Jews, and he's wearing a crown and a purple robe.
Have you thought about here how many times Pilate tried to wash his hands of this?
Yeah.
How many times right there in them verses he tried to quit
I think so.
and he wouldn't let him?
Yeah. You know, it's pretty interesting. When I went to Israel about 10 years ago, they had a stadium around Caesarea, and they had a really, about maybe a third of the stadium was still up from the first century. It's really amazing what they used to do, architecture. Anyway, they had a stone out there in front because a lot of people years ago were saying Pilate was they couldn't find any record of Pontius Pilate. This was all, people attacking the Bible. Couldn't find any record of Pontius Pilate. Well, there they dug up and they had a stone there, right there by the Colosseum. It was built by Pilate, and his name was etched in stone for Caesar, a memorial to him. I used to have it. I took a picture of it. It was really neat. But you could see it was Pilate. They had Pilate on there. Really neat. All right. Verse 5, then Jesus came out wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe. Pilate said to them, here's the man. He didn't say, here's your king. He was saying to them, he's just a man. He's trying to once again convince them he's not a king. Right? His crown is not a real crown, it's a crown of thorns. So Pilate is trying his best to... When the chief priest and the temple police saw him, they shouted, crucify, crucify. Pilate responded, take him and crucify him yourselves, for I find no grounds for charging him. We have a law, the Jews replied to him, and according to that law, he must die, and here it comes, because he made himself the Son of God. Now, for the Jews, that's why they wanted to kill him. But that's not enough for Rome. Rome's not going to kill him because he claimed to be the Son of God. Because Rome accepted, they were very eclectic in their religious beliefs. They accepted all kinds of religions. They were very tolerant. So they're not going to kill him because he claimed to be the Son of God. It's the Jewish power, it's the Jewish lawyers that want to kill him. Right? In verse 8, when Pilate heard this statement, he was more afraid than ever. He went back into the headquarters and asked Jesus, where are you from? But Jesus did not give him an answer. So Pilate said to him, you're not talking to me? Don't you know that I have the authority to release you and the authority to crucify you? And Jesus said, you would have no authority over me at all. Jesus answered, if it hadn't been given you from above, this is why the one who handed me over to you has the greater sin. Who's the one that handed him over to Pilate?
Judas.
Judas. Okay, now let's go on. Verse 12. From that moment, Pilate made every effort to release him, but the Jews shouted, if you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend.
No.
Anyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar. Now when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside. He sat down on the judge's bench in a place called the Stone Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. It was a preparation day for the Passover, and it was about 6 in the morning. Then he told the Jews, here is your king. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him. Pilate said to them, should I crucify your king? We have no king but Caesar, the chief priest answered. So then, because of them, he handed him over to be crucified. So that's why Pilate had to crucify him, because the Jews were convincing him that he was claiming to be a king that would oppose Caesar. Even though Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. They didn't believe that. So that's what they used to have him crucified. I mentioned that the emotions that we see in here, just think about what Pilate went through. I mean, that had to be tough. What he went through. And I'm convinced in verse 11 that Jesus said in the most loving way to Pilate, because he knew he was torn. And look at verse 11. I'm convinced Jesus looked at him and said in the most loving way possible, you would have no authority over me at all if it had not been given to you. Okay, that's all we've got for tonight. Questions? Comments? Complaints?
You know, though, when he said you would have no power over me, because he's trying to let him go. I was trying to let him go.
Trying his best to let him go.
Yeah, so when Jesus said this, it might have been a might have
Provoke
been
him.
trying to provoke him too, because he knew
Yeah.
he had to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you're the,
That was probably the button he needed to push to get it to happen. Because you know what? Pilate, as much as he was torn, Pilate was the man.
right.
You know, and you don't press someone's pride and their ego. And that's kind of what he did.
Especially in front of a bunch of people.
Yeah. Right. Yes, Mike?
I was just thinking of like Peter, he was tempted 3 times to deny Christ, and the first time he was tempted, it was like he was alone, it was kind of dark, and there was this little servant girl. It's pretty easy to say, you know what I mean? The temptation to say, I don't even know him, or whatever, to this girl was pretty easy for him to do. But then the next time it was, you know, and the next time it was more open and more, so it was like, you know, he started, it's kind of like compromising, you know, like a person, we all, you know, like, we're tempted to do something and, you know, nobody's gonna know, it's no big deal, whatever, and then,
Right.
you know, it becomes no.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy, yeah. You know, and that's just it. We need to not be so hard on Peter.
Oh, yeah, how many of us have done the exact same thing?
How many of us have denied him, even early in our Christian walk? How many of us have, you know, had a chance to stand up for him and walk the other way, or we're silent?
Especially conspiracy.
We've all really been Peter.
And one other thing I think too is that I have heard it said, well, you could lose your salvation if you deny Jesus Christ. I think Peter's a good example that no, that's not true. You know, a person can, I believe, go so far as to do something like that.
You can say it, but what he really believed in his heart.
Yeah, it's
And that's why only God can judge our hearts.
right. Yeah.
We are called, let me just say this, speaking of judgment. And many of you have heard this before from me. We are called to judge behavior. But I can't judge your motives, only God can judge your motives. But we're called to judge behavior. And I think that's one of the biggest issues the church has had in my generation, my dad's generation, was they bought separation of church and state, and the church has no right to tell society what to do. That is wrong. That's why we're in the mess we're in today. So when someone says to me, and you know what a lot of people do to back you up? They say, doesn't the Bible say judge not lest you be judged? You know what? That's when I tell them, I've already been judged and I was found guilty.
But also,
And that's why I need Jesus Christ. I am guilty. I've been judged. Right? Amen? Mike? Wait a minute. Mike. Whatever happened to John Smith? Mike? I'm sorry, go ahead.
So with Peter, he was sifted by Satan. This is why that happened to Peter. You know, way more powerful than Peter, Satan.
Right.
Way more powerful.
Right.
None of us would ever be able to stand
And
up
Jesus
to
even
anything
warned
Satan
him.
does.
Here's how powerful he is. Jesus even warned him. Satan has asked permission. Remember Job? Satan had to go before God and ask permission to test Job. Same thing.
Yeah.
See, and that's one thing a lot of people don't realize. Satan still today has the authority to go before God. He hasn't been kicked out of heaven yet. That comes later on when the church is taken to heaven. And he becomes the accuser of the brethren before God. And God says, that's enough. Don't talk about my people that way. And then he casts them to the earth. Satan has not been thrown to the earth yet. He still has access to God.
So,
For now.
For now. For now. But there are days coming when the church is raptured and the bride is there. And he keeps accusing the bride. You know, what's Don Hinton doing up here? That's what he'll say. And that's when Jesus will say, look, I've had enough. And they're going to cast him to the earth. Yes, Mike?
So I'm just thinking, I mean, Satan can't, he doesn't have permission to do anything to us unless God allows it.
Absolutely,
So
that's right.
in our day-to-day actions or whatever, when Satan's, buffeting us or whatever,
He's been allowed to do that, to test us, to test our faith. Absolutely, yeah. And you know what he'll find out? He'll find out that we fail most of the time, or a lot of times. And that's why, once again, we got to return to the cross. I still need Jesus. No matter how many years I've been a Christian, I still need the blood of Christ. Amen? All right. God bless you all. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.